I've been practicing, but that doesn't mean a whole lot.
I think you should announce each step, Jeff, so I can learn from you.
I'll walk you through it the best I can if this works. Okay. Are you able to see my screen?
Looks like it's
Yes.
coming up. Yep.
Absolutely.
This is just an accounting of the activity that we've had, enforcement activity that we've had since our last meeting. And it's been really, really very busy. And I'm going to show you a couple of photographs if I can. I'm going to get really tricky here as we go through some of this. But just let me run through it first. We've had a total of 14 incidents this past month of alcohol and tobacco violations, but you'll see that all but one are really alcohol tobacco violations. And more specifically, they tend to be other tobacco products, which is really what we see so much of anymore. We still do get contraband cigarettes, and we have a fairly sizable seizure of them this past month, but largely it's the other tobacco products that we're seeing. And I want to draw your attention to the first two, this case number 220008 and 9. Both of those are related cases. They've taken place multiple locations in Prince George's County and Montgomery County, where retailers are getting untaxed OTP as well as some contraband product. When I say contraband product, the fact that it's tobacco is real, but they're labeled as other products that are trademarked and owned by other companies, and they're labeling them as that and selling them as that. And I'm going to show you a couple of photographs really soon of just a couple of ideas what this looks like. The rest are standard other tobacco products that we've got from a variety of stores, some from a hookah establishment as well, that in addition to, well, I would go to that just a moment, but hookah as well as some other OTP. And then we had something kind of interesting, and it's this 0036. We seized an 8-gallon still. This was as a result of a fairly long, over a year-long investigation into someone allegedly manufacturing and selling spirits in Somerset County. Specifically, I think it was in the Crisfield area, and was advertising on Facebook. And it took us a while to actually build up the ability to get inside and make an undercover purchase, which we did. And when we went inside and made the purchase, the gentleman was very freely gave us the information. We do expect that he will be charged soon. But he also had a brand new 8-gallon still, had never been used before, which we seized. What he was doing prior to that was something we call rectifying product. He was taking Everclear, which is a commercially manufactured product, and mixing it with a pureed fruit and letting it sit for a while and then selling that. And so we finished that investigation. We expect to be charging him very soon. On the 0021, drawing your attention to that, it's transportation and possession of unstamped cigarettes, 7,500 packs. And you'll see that it says a case adopted from Kent County Sheriff's Department. This organization, they're now ATC, previously Field Enforcement Division, it's been around now since 1999. And we focused a lot on contraband tobacco products as well as illegal and unauthorized elements of alcohol. And along the way, we started training our partners in law enforcement of what we look for, because there are some very specific signs to identify what a smuggler is and who's involved in this trade. We've learned how to identify the smugglers themselves, as well as the locations that cater to them. And typically, they're legitimate operations in other states like Delaware or Virginia, especially, where people can buy cigarettes at a very, very low tax rate, as we talked about before, and bring them into Maryland and sell them at a considerable profit. In this instance, Kent County Sheriffs were able to make a traffic stop, identified these unstamped cigarettes, and because it's kind of a unique type of process and charge, and they're quite large to the store, some of you have the opportunity to see our facility, they asked us to adopt the case, and we do. We'll go out, we'll make the seizure, we'll charge people and handle that. I wanted to draw your attention to that. But as I said, the last month we've had 14 individual circumstances. We had 15 people that have been or will be charged, almost 43,000 pieces of OTP, and over 7,600 packages of unstamped cigarettes. And I wanted to, before I show you a couple of photographs, again, I want to draw your attention to this 0009. It says we received 28 OTP sticks and seized them. And this is part of that case I said was a very large case involving a couple of residences, some businesses, vehicles that we had to get search warrants for and conduct a lot of seizures. That doesn't sound like a lot, but when I show you the photographs, it'll make a little bit more sense. So bear with me for just a second. This is where it all starts to get kind of tricky for me. Okay, just to make it easy on myself, first I'm going to show you a photograph of this still, because I have it right up and available for you. So this is brand new, shiny. It's an 8-gallon still. And this would have been used to distill spirits because I think the gentleman was migrating into becoming a distiller. But as I mentioned earlier, he was a rectifier. And what a rectifier does is they take large bulk product and combine it. Some sense they mix it with other things. They bottle it. They take large quantities of bulk alcohol and bottle it. That's what rectifying is. It is a type of manufacture, and it's really a related operation to distilling itself. And this gentleman was going to be beginning distilling very soon. And let me grab one more set of photographs for you. Bear with me. Now, these are all together. This is just in a Word document. It's 4 different photographs. But what I want to show you, when I said there was only 28 sticks of OTP, that's because there were, or packages, that's because there were 28 that were already formed and ready for sale. But what we found was a lot of tobacco that's already been ground up, as you see in this upper left-hand corner, different ways of storing it, weighing it, measuring it out, sifting it as through these colanders to get some of the larger pieces out. This is some of the raw tobacco that needs to be processed, just in large garbage bags. And again, this is kind of what it looked like once it was processed and finally crushed or made into smaller product, usable product that was put in a bag. And then labels were put on it indicating that it was product that it was not. A couple of things to just draw your attention to. Cleanliness is obviously not important to people who are making counterfeit product. And interestingly enough, we've had over the years several items of counterfeit product, and some of them look very, very good and almost indistinguishable from the real thing, but for a couple of trademark issues or little items, identifiers that the manufacturers put in there and tell us about, so we know what to look for. So this isn't the dirtiest of places we've been into, but it's clearly not clean. And that's another reason that we have to be so vigilant in what we do, because this can be not just a potentially dangerous product when it's done right, but when it's done wrong, who knows? We really just don't know. So that's our activity report for the past month. It's been really busy, and again, we've had a lot of seizures. And then I'd like to talk just briefly, if I might, about the management associate that we mentioned last week, just to give you an update on the progress. And the state doesn't move very, very quickly in hiring people. We've got a process like I guess everybody else does. But what we do have is now a list of 15 candidates. We had 15 applicants who applied for the job. We just got that list just yesterday from Human Resources. And we will begin to interview. Since it is only 15, we're going to interview all of them and see who the best candidates are. Now, the way the state works typically is we have to rank these people in order of how they scored during their interview. And as I mentioned before, I'm happy to have any of you join the interview panel if you'd like. I know that can be cumbersome, and I'm more than happy to do that. And then, and if that's the route we go, which I know you suggested last week we would, then once we create this list of the 15 people and we rank the top several, we'll make sure we have the opportunity or the option to select from those more broadly than having to take whoever came out number one. And then I think we go into a private executive session to discuss where you might want to go with that, if that sounds okay.
Are you going to do in-person interviews, or are you going to do video interviews?
We'll be doing in-person interviews. We'll bring them in, and we'll have a panel of at least 3 people to conduct, and it'll be a very structured interview. We'll have questions that have been approved by a variety of sources, and it's actually our hiring system is a pretty solid system, and we do generally get some of the best candidates on top.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you very much. Now that we can have a quorum, I'm going to open the meeting. We'll do a roll call. So Alan Silverstein here, Barbara Wall.
Here.
Okay, Eric Morset.
Here.
And is Robert Poole on the line? Okay, if not, we do have a quorum. And I'm asked, we had minutes sent to us from July 15th, 2021. I need a motion for approval.
I'll move to approve.
Okay, Barbara. Second.
Second.
Eric. Second by Eric. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, the ayes have it. The minutes are approved. Okay, Department of Health. Dawn, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Trying to share my screen here. So we had a commissioner request last time for some data. So let me see if this works. Can you see?
I see a DD. There you go.
Here it is.
Okay, and let me know if this works now. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we just put together a quick overview of adult and youth tobacco use and alcohol use in the state. I wanted to talk a little bit about how we collect this data, what the rates are, and then some resources that we have. And anywhere along the way, we have a lot more data that we can offer. But I just wanted to give you a snapshot and see where you want to go from there. So for youth risk behaviors in the state, we implement every other year in the fall of even calendar years, a combined youth risk behavior survey and a youth tobacco survey. And since the master settlement agreement, since 2000, we've been required by statute to collect both youth and adult tobacco use data every other year. And we compare that to our baseline data collected in 2000. This survey, the youth survey, is conducted through my office statewide through the Center for Tobacco Prevention and Control. This is the classroom-based survey, so paper and pencil, like a minimum of 60,000 middle school and high school youth, so quite a large survey. Because of the pandemic in 2020 and kids were not in school, we did not conduct it. We did just this past spring conduct a smaller youth pandemic behavior survey that I'm getting the data for right now of 600 youth around the state, just to see how those behaviors changed and look at youth behaviors during the pandemic. But we are all ready to go for this fall to get back in the classroom. So we've been doing trainings with the schools and the coordinators, and we should have 2021-2022 school year data. The data is representative of all Maryland public middle school and high school students. And because it is such a large survey by design, we do that so we not only get state level data, but we do get jurisdiction level data as well. The Youth Risk Behavior Survey and the Youth Tobacco Survey are CDC tools, but we do modify that with specific state questions, Maryland questions, and this is typically by request of stakeholders. So we look at who's using the data and what we include. We are required to use at least 2/3 of the core CDC tool, and then we have some leeway with the other third of the questions. So just a snapshot, in addition to alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, we also collect data on personal safety, bullying and violence, mental health, both suicide and depression, sexual health, and nutrition and physical activity. And a lot of what we've been looking at are positive and adverse childhood experiences, since we're using that in a lot of program planning. And then for adult risk behaviors, this is through the health department as well and through my bureau, but this is conducted through the Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Control. And we use the Maryland Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System, or the BRFIS. And this is a telephone-based survey of adults, typically about 15,000 adults across the state, and we collect data on conditions and behaviors that place Maryland adults at risk for chronic diseases, injuries, and preventable infectious diseases. And we also use a large enough sample size for adults to get that state and local level data.
Dawn, quick question.
Yeah, I was just going to ask.
Oh, how do you get your database for making the telephone calls to the 15,000 adults?
Nicardi, are you on? Are you able to answer that? I have my epidemiologist on.
Yes, I am. The database, so the Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Control, they use a contractor. So the contractor actually gets interval numbers from CDC, and they're able to pull cell phone numbers and landline numbers, and they put it in the computer system. It's randomized, and then that's how they just pretty much dial and call people for the survey and do the survey over the phone.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Any other questions on the surveys themselves? Okay, great. So first, a snapshot of what we're seeing in youth alcohol use, and the numbers I'm showing, we're specifically focusing on high school youth. So we see about 1 in 4, or a quarter of high school students report drinking alcohol. It's right around 24%. About half of those, 1 in every 8 high school students reports binge drinking. And CDC defines binge drinking as 4 or more drinks in a row for females, or 5 or more drinks in a row for male students. And 15% of high school students report that they rode with a driver who had been drinking alcohol within the last month. When we look at the county breakdown, and I don't know how big or how clear this is on your screen, so I'm happy to share these slides afterwards. But the darker or redder the colors get, the higher the numbers. So whereas we have about 24% as the statewide average, we see lower rates in the green and in the central region, and also in Wicomico County. And the highest rates were recorded on the Eastern Shore in Kent and Queen Anne. So up to 40% high school use in Queen Anne's County, so notably high there. And then when we look at demographics, when we look at race and ethnicity, white students reported being more likely to drink alcohol compared to Hispanic, Latino, or Black students. So 32% of white students, 20% of Hispanic, Latino, and 17% of Black students. White students were also 3 times more likely to binge drink compared to Black students, and almost 2 more times likely to binge drink compared to Hispanic or Latino students. That said, we see that Black and Hispanic Latino students were more likely to have their first drink at a younger age. So 18% of Black students and 16% of Hispanic Latino students had their first drink before the age of 13, compared to 12% of white students. Then when we look at adult alcohol use, over half of Maryland adults report drinking in the past 30 days. And I do want to note also, which I didn't, the data that I just showed for youth was from the 2018-2019 school year. So this is pre-pandemic, as well as this Burfus data for adults is from 2019. So this is all pre-pandemic behavior, because we're interested to see how this did or didn't change when people were home more and certainly under a lot of stress. So over half of Maryland adults reported drinking alcohol in the past 30 days. As far as heavy drinking or chronic drinking, for adult men, that's 14 or more drinks per week, and adult women, just 7 or more drinks per week. And 5% of Maryland adults report that heavy or chronic drinking in the past 30 days. And 14% of Maryland adults report binge drinking in the past 30 days. So those numbers are the same for adults and youth, 5 or more drinks for men and 4 or more drinks for women. When we look at alcohol use by jurisdiction for adults, 53% is the statewide average. So everything green is under the statewide average. We saw the highest rates in Hartford and Queen Anne's County, both right around 62%, and lowest in Somerset and Caroline. And Jeff, now that you have that still, we expect Somerset to go down even lower. When we look at the demographics of adult tobacco, or excuse me, alcohol use, whites were again more likely to drink alcohol compared to Black and Hispanic or Latino adults. So 59% of white adults, 51% of Black adults, and 39% of Hispanic Latino adults. Males more likely to drink alcohol compared to females. Not a huge disparity, but 57 versus 50%. And white adults were also more likely to binge drink compared to Black adults. So that's 16% versus 12%. Okay, any questions on alcohol before I move to tobacco?
I'm curious about some of the like the data, like the geographical kind of breakdown for Queen, like are you able to get any kind of sense of like I guess the Eastern Shore makes sense to me for Queen Anne's, but like Hartford, like is there any kind of rationale for that?
Yeah, I was looking this over beforehand, and yeah, that stood out to me too. I mean, we know, and Nicardi, if you're still on, I don't know what you have at your fingertips. I mean, we know that opioid use has really skyrocketed in Hartford County as well. So I don't know if there's a relationship there. Nicardi, any other insight on that one?
Yeah, so for Hartford and some of the smaller counties, we do have to be aware of. So the behavioral risk factor surveillance system, the adult survey is surveyed at a state level. And so it really depends on how many people they actually get in their sample by county. So sometimes that can also play a role in how high or low the percentages are. Depending on how the sample falls and how many people they call from Hartford, for example, versus some of the other counties. So that might be something. Yeah, but I'm not too sure about why
And there were,
that
there
much higher.
and there are 15,000 total statewide for adults, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
At a
we
rep center.
could pull numbers and confidence intervals on this too, right, Nicardi?
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Mhm.
I'm just curious, mostly because like the Kent and Queens County, and just like the interest. Like it's also interesting to me that Kent is not kind of the youth is higher than the adult population for Kent, and like it just seems interesting to me that the adults are not drinking at the same kind of rate. But I guess it also fall along the kind of representative sample size issue as well. I assume maybe. I don't know. So, sorry, I'll move on. That's all I had.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So then when we move to looking at youth tobacco use, we know that by far, when we look at e-cigarettes or vapes or ENDS products or whatever you call them in Maryland, and in statute, we call them electronic smoking devices. That's really what youth are using. And when we see the cigarette smoking rate is only about 5% for youth, and this was really about the same before electronic use skyrocketed. We had done a really good job in getting overall youth tobacco use rates down. We see that electronic smoking device use is 4 times higher than that of cigarettes, cigars, or smokeless tobacco. And by and large, we know that flavors really, really make these products attractive. 96% of high school youth who use these products are using flavors such as fruit, mint, or candy.
I thought there was a federal ban, or recently there was legislation to ban flavored e-cigarettes. And
So there's we have in Maryland, the comptroller last year banned disposable flavored products. At the federal level, the ban was just on things like Juul, like cartridge-based products.
okay,
So, and it was not on mint or menthol. So the mint and menthol products were still available in the cartridge-based products, and that's why we saw a real shift from Juuls to all these disposable products that come in lots and lots of flavors. So these should not be sold in Maryland now with the disposable ones. Kathy, I don't know if you're on and there's anything else you want to add as far as legislation on that.
Yep, sorry, I actually had unmuted my camera when you asked the question. So Dawn covered the current status accurately. There has been in the last couple of legislative sessions in Maryland, legislation introduced to prohibit the sale of flavored tobacco products broadly. So it would include vape products, even and you go to a vape shop and they fill up your device and things like that. And I expect to see something come in the 2022 session, but it hasn't. The only The only one that has made progress actually excluded the vape products, like I just said, the ones from the vape shops and the like. That's the only one that had passed over the House and crossed over to the Senate. So I don't think right now the environment at the legislature is favorable for an outright flavored ban. I just want to add that right now the FDA is in the process of considering applications for authorization of all vape products. It's a really confusing history about how vapes are even on the market and what I'm talking about. But all vape product manufacturers had to file an application last fall to allow their products to remain on the market. One of the factors that the FDA required all vape product manufacturers to submit was information about flavors, information about youth use and the like, and that is one of the criteria the FDA is looking at. But they have made 0 decisions. They've actually rejected some applications, but they've made 0 authorization decisions. So I think we'll see in the next 6 to 12 months the FDA in making decisions on these applications, whether and how they're going to kind of thread the needle, if you will, with flavors, because I do think that they will have some flavor restrictions.
Thank you.
Sure.
So, and
I'm sorry, Dawn, this is Jeff. If I could just weigh in on this as well.
Yep.
And I'm going to ask Kathy and you, between the two of you, to correct me if I say something wrong here. When the comptroller made this ban last year, it wasn't specifically because it was flavored. The hook, if you will, for the comptroller was that at a federal level, the EDS or ESDs were required to be registered in some fashion as companies, and they were not. Most of them were not. In fact, none of them had not been. None of them had registered with the FDA, so they weren't approved. And so we used that as the reason for saying we could ban them, because at the federal level, they weren't approved. Nobody had been. And then I believe in some sense, I think it was the PACT Act or so recently requires the EDS companies to register at local levels. And I say that because I know that within the comptroller's office, there have been a variety of these EDS companies now sending in registrations with the comptroller. So I hope we're going to get some legislative remedy to this in the next year, because I think they're starting to find workarounds now, and we may start seeing more products. We're not able to do something proactively this coming year.
Thank you.
yeah, and I'm happy to provide pictures at some point. I think this gets really confusing, and especially if you're not in this field, you hear that, okay, there's been a flavor ban, and you think that there's been a flavor ban. So there are really like 3 different types of products. You have the cartridge-based products, like the Juul. It's like a little thumbnail cartridge that inserts into the device. So that's where the federal flavor ban took place. And then in Maryland, we call them like Cigalikes. So they're like just disposable. They look like electronic cigarettes. That's where the Maryland flavor ban was for these disposable products. But then you have a whole myriad of what Kathy was talking about. We see largely in the vape shops of these refillable products. So these are like the tanks, but all these flavors, like we call them e-juices, can be made in like 80,000 flavors or something and mixed. And those are all still totally legal on the market. So even these products that are cartridge based, we hear from kids that even though they're not supposed to be able to open up the cartridge and refill it, they can figure out how to do anything. So there really still are a lot of flavors available. It's a big loophole. And then here's the breakdown. We are seeing the maps similar in some ways, but quite a bit different in some ways between alcohol and tobacco and adult and youth use. Here, where we see a lot of risk behaviors increase, we see Western Maryland and the Eastern Shore. The rates much higher. The overall state tobacco use rate among high school youth is just over 27%, and you could see over 40% on the Eastern Shore and in Western Maryland. And again, that kind of middle band of the capital area, lower use. When we look at the demographic breakdown here for tobacco use, Hispanic and Latino students were more likely to smoke cigarettes or cigars and use ESDs than Black students. White students were also more likely to use ESDs compared to Black or Hispanic and Latino students. Males more likely to use smokeless tobacco, cigars, and cigarettes compared to female students. And students identifying as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, LGBT students. And we see this with most risk behaviors, much more likely to use tobacco products compared to heterosexual or cisgender students. So 36% compared to 26%. And when we look at adult use, the really notable thing here is that the tobacco product of choice for adults is still cigarettes. Always has been cigarettes, remains cigarettes, and high school students are 5 times more likely to use electronic products than adults. So, when these products first came out and they were often promoted, even though there was not FDA approval to do so, but they were often promoted as a cessation device or a product for adults to switch to. We're really not seeing in actuality that that's the case. Only 4% of adults report using ESDs. And if you break that down even further, the majority of those using these products are 18 to 24-year-olds. So these products definitely skew young. And then when we look at current tobacco use by county, Somerset and Allegheny, so way down on the Eastern Shore, and at the west, we see the highest rates, and Montgomery, Howard, and Prince George's the lowest here. Looking at demographic use by adults, white and Black adults more likely to use a tobacco product compared to Hispanic and Latino, 19 and 20 versus 13%. LGBT adults more likely to use tobacco products, 34% versus 18%. Men, not surprisingly, 6 times more likely to use smokeless tobacco compared to females, and men also over 3 times more likely to smoke cigars compared to females. So when we look at youth access, I talked about it in prior meetings. A lot of what my office also does are the compliance checks and enforcement and working with Jeff on this. The top 3 ways are the same that youth report to access cigarettes and electronic products. First, by borrowing them or bumming a cigarette. By proxy means that they ask an older adult or an older youth who's legal to buy them for them. And then by store or gas station, buying them themselves. What is notable here is that 2/3 of underage students report that they're not being asked for a photo ID when they bought or tried to buy a cigarette. So what we really focus on with our retailer education is, just that act of asking for ID is really, really important because that triggers the retailer to check ID and make sure that they're now 21 before selling tobacco products. So tobacco retailers who did ask for a photo ID were 2.5 more times more likely to refuse the sale of cigarettes to those who were underage. And because several years ago, we had the highest non-compliant rates in the country of retailers selling to kids, we have developed a pretty intensive website and training and quiz for retailers. So we have lots and lots of free materials available. The website, this is Maryland specific, is notobaccosalestominders.com. We added a lot of information on here when October 1st, 2019, the minimum legal sales age in Maryland went from 18 to 21. So we updated all our materials. This 21 or none was our kind of our slogan, our branding for our campaign. It's a whole responsible retailer training along with a quiz. So these are the sections for the training, overview of the laws, what are tobacco products and paraphernalia, since that's all covered under the minimum legal sales age law, fines and penalties for selling underage, what are valid forms of ID and how to check it, how to calculate a customer's age, tips for refusing sales, because we heard that from retailers. It's, it's hard to say no. How do I kind of diffuse the situation? And then the quiz. So we have on the left, you can see no person under the age of 21 may be sold tobacco products. We have free posters, window clings, lots of materials downloadable, and we could also send the actual materials to retailers. ID guide of all different types of ID. And then I know you can't read this, but since laws in some local jurisdictions are stricter than state laws, we have a list of those. And we've even updated, it's not in here, but COVID protocol too. And then there's just a simple 10-question quiz at the end. Retailers or clerks, whoever takes this, need to get 70% to pass. And then there's a certificate they can print out. So I wanted to include this because one of the things we've talked about the past couple meetings is that one of the recommendations from the Comptroller's EFACS task force was to require a training for retailers, and they have to pass a quiz at license renewal for tobacco licenses. So I just wanted to show what we have available. This is existing, so this would be something that would be pretty simple to implement if there's a will among the commission to work to do so.
That'd be kind of like the TIPS program for alcohol, which is a training program in order for, in our county, we're home rules, so we have our own alcohol rules, but everybody who serves alcohol, first of all, you must serve 2 meals a day, but everybody who serves alcohol, all their staff have to be TIPS trained and have to pass the test. And I know I went through it about 5 years ago to see what it was like. So this would be a similar program where they would have to go get an education, and at the end of it, you take the test.
Right, and that's for the license holder, and then retailers could require their clerks to take this as well. Okay. Yep. So just quick kind of summary points. We know that youth and adults both use tobacco and alcohol products, and youth do have access to these products. Youth prefer electronic smoking devices and by far flavors, whereas adults prefer cigarettes. Primary access for tobacco products among youth are borrowing, proxy access, or buying it directly from stores or gas station. Most youth do report not being asked for a photo ID when they were successful in buying cigarettes. And we have this whole Maryland Responsible Retailer program with resources, materials, and the quiz that talks about the laws and how to check ID and refuse sales. So that's...
Question, in New York, I knew a number of years ago, they had a program where they had undercover people coming into the different retail sellers of tobacco and bringing underage people in them like you do with alcohol. Is that a program that you operate?
Yep. Yeah, so there are actually 2 federal programs. We have 3 sets of checks. So 2 federal programs. One, my office holds a contract for the FDA where we have FDA commissioned officers who go out and check and enforce sales and marketing as well. And that gets reported directly to the FDA to take action. Also, every state since 1992, there was this 9R amendment, which required states to have a minimum legal sales age of 18 and enforce that. So we have to do a certain number of SINAR compliance checks each year, and at least 20%, or not over, at least 80% of retailers need to comply with the law. If the non-compliance rates go over 20%, there's a penalty to the state of Maryland and jeopardy for state substance abuse prevention and treatment block grants. And we found ourselves, that's what I was saying, we were the first state in years to be out of compliance in 2013, 2014. whereas Governor O'Malley and then Governor Hogan both had to find additional dollars to dedicate towards enforcement to kind of save those block grant funds. And that's when we developed this whole program to really ensure that retailers, were following the law. We created it to make retailers our partners instead of really being punitive, but here's how to be a responsible retailer. And then as part of that, we fund each local jurisdiction. We fund all 24 jurisdictions to go out and do their own compliance checks as well. So these are, any combination of those selling to underage youth, that's what can be referred to Jeff to go take action and conduct hearings against those retailers if there are multiple violations.
The states that border Maryland, are they all 21 or are some of them still 18?
So shortly after Maryland's law went into effect in October 2019, in December 2019, that became a federal law. So now it's 21 across the nation.
Okay, thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
I'm just asking
Anybody else, Eric?
one other question. So the rate of compliance now, I assume that we're in a better place of compliance than we were in those previous years. How do we stack up against the other states now? Are we still on the lower side in terms of rate of compliance as to other states, or?
So we had been at 24% and then 31% non-compliant, and after I think 3 years we were down hovering around 11-12%. So we had really decreased those rates. And last year we weren't able to conduct any compliance checks because it's taking kids out in cars with adults and going into stores. So with COVID, that really all fell by the wayside. So we're in the process of ramping up now. The federal fiscal year starts October 1st. So we're trying to get everything ready to start again October 1st.
Thank you. Thank you. This is extremely insightful, and for all the work you're doing. Great.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
as I recall, back in 2013, when we had 2013-14, when we had our issues with some of the compliance, I kind of remember that in years previous to that, the state was funding the local jurisdictions in their compliance checks, quite frankly. And then that funding kind of dried up to the point where there was zero funding. It wasn't happening. And so the local jurisdictions weren't doing any compliance checks. And we saw an immediate and I guess predictable result of non-compliance. And that's really what got hurting us. And then a couple of years later, when we really started working hard on this, significant funding was reinstituted at the local levels. And I think we were in danger of a third year of failure. There was such an effort to comply that 2015, we ended up coming from, I think, a deficit to very, very, very good compliance, which was in danger prior to that.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So in 2009, 2010, we lost like 70 to 80% of our tobacco control funding across the state. So the enforcement programs were one of the first things that went by the wayside. And as you said, Jeff, we saw, retailers saw that nobody was out checking and rates really did increase. So that's why we really want to get back out there. And the local health departments, in addition to doing the compliance checks, they all go out and do retailer education first. So they take materials, they provide them to retailers, show them how to check an ID. So it's really not an operation where we're trying to do stings and target bad folks, but we really want to educate them and we don't want them selling.
Okay. All right. Well, Dawn, thank you very much. Very insightful. Can you make available those slides to us?
Yep.
Jeff,
I'll send out the slides, and I have just one more thing I wanted to share. So in a few weeks, I have actually accepted a new position within the state, which may or may not continue to work with this commission. I am going to be the deputy director for the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission. So Jeff, I know you know Will Tilburg well, and he kind of pulled me over and said, come run this with me, bring the tobacco policy experience, bring the prevention experience. So
wonderful.
So after 2 decades of doing this, it's kind of hard to believe that I'm moving to something else, but I feel it's tangential at least. And I know there were bills last year to combine cannabis and the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission. So I don't know what the department is going to do specifically with my role sitting on this. So I will keep you posted on that, but I expect that, and I hope that this won't be the last we're seeing of each other. And Nicardi and Kathy and several of my folks have been following along. So there will be kind of a seamless transition as far as the information if I'm not able to be on the meetings. So I thank you all for all your support.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for everything.
Thank you.
Yes.
Great information. I know that Mr. Poole had asked us to put on the agenda last time, and this time hiring a paid advisor. I don't see him on the call, and so I think we're just going to hold that over. I know that in talking with Mr. Kelly, one of our issues is finance, and so, you know, if we were even to consider that, we would have to find the money first before we move forward with anything else. So, but we can have that discussion when Mr. Poole is able to join us. Also, he had asked about disparity among county liquor laws, grocery store sales, and we'll do the same. We'll wait for him to join us and see what his thoughts are, and then we can address that issue. The next item is future meetings. Based upon the variants that are going on and everything else, it seems like we're going to continue this format. It works pretty well, unless, Jeff, you're hearing something different from the state.
No, sir, not at all. And in fact, we did a poll of several of the other commissions and found that in the immediate short-term period, they were all still doing virtual. They were considering September, as a few of them are considering September as maybe trying some live meetings. But I think this variant has stalled that movement right now.
Okay. Do we have any new business?
I just had one question, sorry, or suggestion, especially if like the variant is still high during the point which we're doing, you guys are doing interviews, maybe a virtual option as well for folks that are just like, don't feel safe for the other position that you discussed earlier, Jeff. Does that make sense?
It does. And now it does. And that is something we do have a protocol in place for that. Because we work as an agency, we were doing that for a period of time. So we can always revert back to that if there gets to be a point where it's just not safe, or if someone's just not comfortable. We absolutely have mechanisms to do that.
That's all I had. Sorry, y'all. That's all.
All right, perfect. Do we have any new business other than that? All right, so I'll take a motion for adjournment.
Motion.
Okay, I'll second that motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Same sign for those opposed. All right, thank you all very much for joining us today. I hope that everybody got some good information out of our meeting, and look forward to next month's meeting. Thank you.
Be safe. Bye, y'all.
Take care.
Thanks.